I'm Eric Anderson. Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, the president wants an extension of health plans, but California's exchange says no. And Senator Barbara Boxer wants to know what happened with some documents about the San Onofre nuclear plant. She says they've gone missing.
I'm Amita Sharma. Tonight we'll also take a closer look at a proposal to refund millions of dollars to ratepayers after the shutdown of San Onofre. And 50 years after the assassination of John F. Kennedy, we remember the late president's visit to San Diego.
And from our Fronteras desk tonight, squatters built much of Tijuana in the past couple of decades, but city planners are not happy about it. KPBS Evening Edition starts now. Need to catch up on. Good evening and thanks for joining us. Dwayne Brown is off tonight. California's health exchange will stick with its approach of phasing out policies that don't meet the standards of the Affordable Care Act, even though President Barack Obama called for an extension of those policies. The Board of Covered California says extensions would undermine the new insurance marketplace. More than 1 million Californians have gotten cancellation notices because of the confusion over the cancellations. Covered California is giving people more time to buy a policy. The new deadline is December 23rd, with a first payment on January 4th. Today, we also got an enrollment update from the exchange. The pace is picking up. You can see the increase in this chart. More than 70,000 people completed applications just last week. We're also getting a better idea of who's signing up, or at least their ages. More than half of them were ages 45 to 54. Nearly a quarter of the applicants were in the 18 to 34 age range. Insurance companies say younger enrollees are needed to make the policies financially viable. Senator Barbara Boxer is accusing federal regulators of withholding records relating to the San Onofre nuclear power plant. In a letter to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, she says some documents she requested about the federal investigation may have been removed from what was given to her. The San Onofre plant was shut down earlier this year. The NRC has not commented on Boxer's allegations. And the first consumer refund for San Onofre costs is being proposed. Amita Sharma is in for Peggy Pico tonight. She has details.
California energy regulators may be leaning in favor of giving ratepayers some financial relief for the shuttered San Onofre nuclear power plant. Two administrative law judges proposed this week that customers should receive a $94 million refund for costs associated with running the plant last year. Martha Sullivan is with the grassroots group called Coalition to Decommission San Onofre. She joins me now to talk about the proposal. Martha, how do you view this proposal by these administrative law judges?
You know, it has good news and it has bad news for consumers. The good news is that the administrative law judges who've heard the evidence in this investigation into the outage have sent a very clear message that Edison can't just take ratepayers for granted and that ratepayers are on the hook for anything that Edison does. They've concluded that Edison didn't act reasonably and have tried to saddle the ratepayers with far too many costs. The bad news is that it's only $94 million that the judges are proposing in refunds in this first phase. We haven't done our detailed analysis yet. We think it should be more in this first phase. I do want to emphasize that this decision defers to phase 3, $122 million in cost, and also the replacement power costs. So those decisions still are to come in phase 3, along with some other big decisions in phase 2 and phase 3.
Okay, now I should say we asked representatives from both San Diego Gas and Electric, which owns 20% of the plant, and Southern California Edison to come on the program. They declined. But in a written statement, Edison said the proposed decision's refund is based on a finding that SCE did not adequately consider putting San Onofre's Unit 2 in preservation expansion mode after May 2012 and laying off employees then. SCE's comments, which will be filed in 20 days, will address why these conclusions are not supported by the record. How likely is it that the full Public Utilities Commission will stand by the administrative law judge's recommendations and not be swayed by Edison's forthcoming arguments?
That's really the $64,000 question, or in this case, the $94 million question. That's why it's going to be really essential for the public to make its views known over the next month. It's been put on the Commission's agenda for December 19th. There's 20 days to comment on this proposed decision. Only the parties can comment on the proposed decision. We're going to comment on it. But we're also going to be doing something that we do very well, which is to mobilize public opinion, like we did at the October 1st public hearing here in San Diego on these costs. And we're going to be asking our supporters to remind the Commission, you know, stop the San Onofre bailout, and that the ratepayers need the Commissioner's help more than this multi-mega million dollar corporation.
And the larger fight on this issue for customers is far from over.
Exactly.
Edison continues to push for customers to help cover the multi-billion-dollar tab on the shutdown costs for San Onofre nuclear power plant. What's the status of that request?
Well, actually, we have briefs due in Phase 2 tomorrow at the Commission. And my colleague Ray Lutz is working on our brief. And that is that's talking about billions of dollars of sunk cost in the plant that Edison and SDG&E still want the ratepayers to cover, regardless of the fact that because of Edison's really recklessness and their single-minded focus on their own profit, they basically, you know, prematurely shut this plant down, and they're trying to saddle the ratepayers with the consequences of their action.
Now, in related news today, very quickly, Senator Barbara Boxer today accused the Nuclear Regulatory Commission of not turning over documents, all the documents that she requested on San Onofre. What do you know about this?
Well, it's even worse than that. It's not that they refused to turn over some documents. They're basically saying that from here on out, we're not going to give out any documents. I mean, they have defied her oversight as the chair of the committee that oversees the NRC before, and now they're basically just flat out saying, we're not going to give you anything. And this is the NRC and the nuclear industry's safety culture. It's silence. It's the stone wall. It's not safety culture. It's their own preservation and supporting the nuclear industry.
And we've got to close it there. Martha Sullivan, thanks for coming on the program.
Thank you.
The San Diego City Council has approved water rate increases for the next 2 years. The rates pass on wholesale price hikes. They'll bring the city 7% more revenue next year. Rates on individual customers will vary depending on usage. Today, the council also freed up more money for advertising for the Tourism Marketing District, approving a contract amendment that gives the agency an extra $6 million for promotion. The TMD will also get $4 million to begin a reserve account for any later legal action against the district. Mayoral candidate David Alvarez was the only dissenting vote. The trial of shooting suspect James Holmes has been postponed indefinitely. You may remember that Holmes is that San Diego native accused of killing a dozen people in a Colorado movie theater back in 2012. He was supposed to go to trial back in February, but the judge put it off so lawyers can argue whether Holmes should get another psychiatric evaluation. He did plead not guilty by reason of insanity. Encinitas is taking the first step toward banning plastic bags. The city council voting to begin working on a ban ordinance. California has yet to pass a bill banning the bags, but there is state legislation in the works. Councilwoman Lisa Schaefer, however, says the environment can't wait for the state to get its act together. Encinitas shoppers won't see any changes anytime soon. The process to draft and pass a bill could stretch well into next year. Tijuana is a city of migrants. For decades, people from all over Mexico have come to Tijuana in pursuit of jobs and a new life. The city's rapid growth has kept urban planners on the run in an effort to keep that city livable. Jill Replogle from our Fronteras desk brings us the first in a series exploring the history of Tijuana and its neighborhoods. Today, we hear how squatter settlements have come to define the city.
Lucy Duran came to Tijuana 23 years ago from Guanajuato in central Mexico. At the time, she was raising 7 kids by herself. She hoped Tijuana would offer a better life for all of them, and she knew she'd find work in the city's booming maquiladora industry. But she needed stable housing. One of the first things Lucy did when she got to Tijuana was join a group that planned to set up an illegal squatter settlement on empty land. It all started with weekly meetings.
They started to take down names of people who wanted land. I started to go to meetings 2 months after we got to Tijuana.
One of the guys who helped organize the squatters was Jesus Minchaca.
We didn't trespass on this land because we wanted to. We had to. Because no government, no landowner, no government agency that could have resolved the problem was interested.
The problem was Tijuana simply didn't have enough housing for poor people who came from all over Mexico for the factory jobs. Land occupations by groups of squatters became a primary driver of the city's growth. Up until recently, more than half of Tijuana's population lived in what are called informal neighborhoods. The leaders of the occupation that Lucy Duran took part in asked for volunteers to camp out on the land, to stake out the territory for the larger group.
Those who wanted to and were able to camp out could claim the best plots of land, but everyone had to stay together because the police would come and try to kick people out.
Lucy's daughters wouldn't let her camp out. They said it was too dangerous. So the family ended up with a piece of land on a steep, sandy hill.
So this was all hill.
They built one small room out of wood torn off of discarded pallets. Their bathroom was a latrine up a steep hill out back.
This is 1992, probably.
They had no electricity or running water. The streets were unpaved and dusty. Squatters were told that if they were willing to sacrifice like this, eventually the city would have to recognize the neighborhood and bring in basic services. And it did. Minchaca's role was chief negotiator for the squatters.
I love to go to government offices and turn in documents. First, making a friendly request. And then, answer me. And now I'm going in person. Now it's beyond paperwork.
Minchaca still organizes people to get land on the outskirts of Tijuana. And though he's a hero to many of the city's poor, Minchaca and others like him are the nemesis of city officials.
This is the problem. Community leaders who don't understand the problems they're causing.
Instead of strategically mapping out new roads, sewage pipes, and telephone lines, city planners are constantly playing catch-up.
Some settlements are inaccessible. They're on top of a hill that you need a 4-wheel drive to get to. And it's extremely expensive and difficult to get them pavement, to put in drainage, etc.
Plus, a lot of squatter neighborhoods in Tijuana are downright dangerous when it rains. In January 1993, flooding and mudslides killed more than 30 people and left some 10,000 homeless. Rosario, Lucy's daughter, remembers those days.
The house, it slided out like, I would say, about a meter.
Where city officials see hazard, hundreds of thousands of Tijuana residents see hope, or at least reality, and something else, a sense of unity. The Reyes Duran family home is now much improved, as are most of the homes here in the Colonia Gabriel Rodriguez. The roads are paved, there's a school and a small park. There are modern shopping centers nearby with restaurants and grocery stores. Another of Lucy's daughters now lives in the family home. A few years back, Lucy moved to a new brick house in one of Tijuana's planned communities. Even though her new house is more comfortable, Lucy says she misses the old neighborhood.
We were all really united here, but not there. In my new neighborhood, no one talks to you.
Lucy's daughter, Rosario, now lives in San Diego. She has a pay grade well above most of her former neighbors in Tijuana. But still, she says she could go back to the way she lived before, squatting in a one-room shack with her mom and 6 brothers and sisters.
The union in the family was great. So, I mean, regardless of the material stuff and the inconveniences, I learned so much from all of that.
Jill Replogle, KPBS News.
Crafts don't often seize the public's attention, but the Keeling curve is one that actually did. Now, for more than half a century, scientists at the Scripps Institution of Oceanography in La Jolla have used that iconic chart to plot rising carbon dioxide levels in the Earth's atmosphere. But KPBS science reporter David Wagner says funding for the project is increasingly hard to come by.
55 years after his father launched the Keeling curve, Ralph Keeling still takes atmospheric CO2 measurements at Mauna Loa in Hawaii. He says the data collected there offered some of the first evidence that human activity was contributing to global warming. But lately, funding for the Keeling curve has been sloping downward. The National Science Foundation withdrew support a few years ago, and Keeling has had to cut staff. He's currently working to find a more permanent source of revenue for what he considers crucial ongoing work. Comparing Earth to a sick patient, he says we shouldn't stop monitoring the patient's health before we even have a cure for its illness. Earlier this year, the Keeling curve hit 400 parts per million, a milestone marking the highest level of atmospheric CO2 detected on Earth for millions of years. David Wagner, KPBS News.
This is graduation day for the first 3 female Marines to complete infantry training. Privates First Class Katie Gores, Julia Carroll, and Cristina Fuentes Montenegro all went through a 59-day course at Camp Geiger in North Carolina. A 4th woman is expected to graduate in a few weeks. A training injury delayed her progress. The women won't go into infantry roles at this time. The Corps is still studying how to integrate female Marines into combat.
I'm Judy Woodruff. On the next News Hour, Robert McNeil and Jim Lehrer on what it was like to be in Dallas the day President Kennedy was assassinated. That's Thursday on the PBS News Hour.
San Diegans are marking 50 years since the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. Amitha Sharma has more on his 1963 visit right here to San Diego.
San Diego State was still a young West Coast college when it played host to the young, education-minded President John F. Kennedy. The year was 1963. The Cold War was at its height, and so was the Civil Rights Movement. It remains a shining moment for the campus, and one that came 5 months before Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas.
No country can possibly move ahead. No free society can possibly be sustained unless it has an educated citizenry whose qualities of mind and heart permit it to take part in the complicated and increasingly sophisticated decisions that pour not only upon the President and upon the Congress, but upon all the citizens who exercise the ultimate power.
Joining me to remember the visit is Seth Malios, chairman of San Diego State's Anthropology Department and the university's historian. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
So President Kennedy was here to give a commencement speech. What did he say?
It's very interesting because he was campaigning and he had 3 stops along the way. And at American University, he talks about world peace. At Vanderbilt University, he talks about the Tennessee Valley Authority and about the power of the WPA and pulling the country out of the Depression. But when he comes to San Diego State, it's all about education and educational opportunity. He starts his speech by celebrating the Golden State, as he calls it, because California invests so much in education. And then he very cleverly uses that as a platform to talk about minority opportunity in education. Those are the points that he wanted to get across, the importance of education, not only for wealthy individuals, white individuals, male individuals, but for everyone in the United States.
How big of a moment was his speech for San Diego State and the city?
One of the great things about this event is it wasn't just for Democrats in San Diego. Over 250,000 people saw him in San Diego in a 24-hour period. It was a celebration of an icon. This was the height of his presidency. The summer of '63 was a moment where the country had come out of the Cuban Missile Crisis. It was a first victory in the Cold War. Civil rights legislation was about to be introduced. Even though there were still quite a lot of problems, this was a moment of enthusiasm, of optimism. And when he comes to the campus, he's celebrated, and the motorcade goes all the way down the 8 miles of El Cajon to the campus, and then Aztec Bowl, where he gives the commencement address, is just overflowing with students, with parents, and just with interested onlookers.
Now, you say that it wasn't just a moment for Democrats, but at that time, you know, this area was probably largely Republican. Did that in any way shape how he was received here?
That's a great point, because so many people fall into the trap of thinking California often votes democratically now, so it must have always been that way. But for decades, it was a Republican state. In fact, in 1960, JFK did not carry the state of California. The only time the Democrats carry California in many decades, from the 60s through the 80s, ironically, is '64 with Johnson. And it was the campaigning that JFK did during '63 that led to the victory in '64. The celebration, though, was that Kennedy represented something very different than just his Democratic Party. You mentioned he was young, he was good-looking, he had amazing oratorical skills. People who were at the event talk about the fact he glanced at his notes once and then smiled to himself and put them away, and then gives this amazing 14-minute address where he's quoting Jefferson and Thomas Locke very, very fluidly. And again, this is not his standard speech. He was giving a different speech at each locale. And I think that's part of the lore. One other anecdote that I love is that at these graduation ceremonies, they want you to wear the mortarboard hat. Kennedy really liked his hair, and he didn't want to wear a hat. He tries it on and then immediately puts it off to the side. And people who were at the event talked about the sun sparkling in his copper hair. And that's that celebration of an icon that's beyond mere politics.
Do we have anything like that today? Have we had a president visit San Diego State in recent times that compares?
We really haven't. JFK was the only sitting U.S. president to be at San Diego State in all of its history. Ronald Reagan did visit, but that was when he was governor of California. There have been other dignitaries. Eleanor Roosevelt came in '62, but Kennedy was the only sitting U.S. president. And it's funny, there's a list of everyone from the Surgeon General to Hillary Rodham Clinton to vice presidents. But I don't think anything compares to this singular moment.
Seth Malios, thank you so much for sharing this on the program.
More memories now of President Kennedy's visit to San Diego, focusing on a photo that's become sort of famous over the years. Ken Kramer found the man who took it, making that piece of history. Tonight's story about San Diego.
I want to show you a couple of things. First, this is Redford's Restaurant, El Cajon Boulevard, 2900 block between 30th and Kansas Streets. You know the place? Okay, that's one thing. And here is a camera that Mr. James Day bought in 1963.
A 35mm camera, my first 35mm camera. And I bought it right up the street here at Boulevard Camera. It's like a block away.
Now go back to that day, June the 6th, 1963. There was President Kennedy coming down El Cajon Boulevard with his motorcade.
You know, way down the street, we could see Kennedy coming, waving at people. It's like, oh, this is cool. President Kennedy, I mean, he's really here.
Well, he's thinking, new camera. I'd love to get a picture of Kennedy, but oh no, the president is looking the wrong way at the other side of the street.
And I complained to one of my friends. I said, geez, I hope he looks over here. And then my friend around whipped around and goes, we'll get him to look for you. And I thought, oh my God, what are these guys going to do, you know?
Getting closer, going to have time for one picture, that's it.
My friend started chanting loudly, Cuber, 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 not necessarily mocking, but imitating his Harvard accent because we'd seen him on TV so much talking about Cuba.
May not have been the cleverest thing in the world, but it worked.
Kennedy comes by and I lean forward over the people in front of me and they're still chanting Cuber, 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 and focus. You know, remember, this is not autofocus days, this is manual focus. So I focused the best I could, clicked off one picture, and he was waving, and then went by, and they were moving at a decent clip, you know, so I thought, well, either I got it or I don't.
Which brings us back to Redford's here, which just happened to be right across the street from where James was trying to take his picture. And yes, it did turn out. Here it is. The president in the foreground and Redford's in the background. And so well did James and his camera work that day that the restaurant owner later ended up buying the picture and blowing it up into a mural on the outside wall of the place. Seen by countless thousands over the years now, there's his name as the photographer, who just happened to have the right camera and the right crazy friends and the right exposure at the right focus at the right time to document a little history about San Diego.
Of course, if you want to see more of Ken's stories about San Diego, his show can be seen tonight and every Thursday at 8 here on KPBS. More showers and cool temperatures ahead throughout the county. Rain and possible thunderstorms along the coast until Sunday. Temperatures are going to be in the 60s. Same in the inland valleys. Nighttime temperatures dropping into the 40s. Up in the mountains, rain all through the weekend. Temperatures there in the 40s. And out in the desert, thunderstorms on Saturday and Sunday. Temperatures expected to peak around the high 60s. You can find tonight's stories and download the KPBS app all on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks very much for joining us. Have a great evening.